She walked in, uninvited, holding a wooden box, and whispered, "It's from your daughter." Keanu froze. He never had a daughter, at least that's what he believed. But when the box was opened at his mother's birthday dinner, what it revealed would unravel everything he thought he knew about love, legacy, and loss. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The sunlight had begun to dip behind the Los Angeles skyline as warm golden tones settled into the quiet hills above Sunset Boulevard. In a private garden tucked behind a modest house, laughter floated gently through the air. A long table was set beneath hanging lanterns. Patricia Reeves, Keanu's mother, sat at the center, her hands clasped around a delicate cup of chamomile tea, a soft smile lighting her face. A dull contrasts lined the couch, bracing both sides of a small. This was her 78th birthday. Nothing extravagant, just the way she liked it. Keanu had arranged the dinner personally. No press, no fanfare. Just family. A few friends. Peace. Across from her, Keanu sat in a crisp navy shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked relaxed, but not entirely. There was always a certain solemnity about him during family gatherings, as if some part of him remained elsewhere, in memories not yet spoken aloud. Still, he did his best to laugh with his nephew Mason, who just told a joke that made even stoic Uncle Jonathan chuckle into his glass of wine. Patricia raised a toast. Her voice was gentle but steady. To being here together. At this point in life, nothing means more. Everyone clinked glasses. Keanu smiled warmly at his mother, reaching across to touch her hand. It was perfect, until the gate creaked open. A breeze passed through the garden, heads turned. A woman stood just beyond the threshold. Her black dress hung loosely on her frame, her hair tied back in a modest bun. In her hands, she held something, an old wooden box. The moment Keanu saw her, the color drained from his face. "Mariko." He stood without thinking, his chair scraping behind him. His heart pounded in his chest. 28 years. He hadn't seen her since Tokyo, since everything fell apart between them. She was older now, thinner, but her eyes, those eyes, hadn't changed. "I didn't mean to intrude," Mariko said softly, barely above a whisper. "I heard it was Patricia's birthday." Keanu couldn't speak. His throat tightened. Patricia blinked in surprise but quickly stood up, gracious as ever. "Mariko, is that you?" "My goodness." Mariko nodded. She stepped forward, holding the box like it weighed more than it should. "This is for Keanu," she said. "It's from Hana. She wanted you to have it today." A strange silence fell over the garden. Keanu's jaw clenched. "Hana?" Patricia echoed. "Who is Hana?" No one answered. Mariko's hands trembled as she extended the box. "She asked me to bring it here. I didn't know where else to go." Keanu stepped forward, slowly, eyes fixed on the box. He took it from her hands, and the moment his fingers brushed the carved cherry blossoms, something old and forgotten rose in his chest. The wood was worn but beautiful, clearly handmade. A music box, crafted with love and time. On the lid was a faded inscription in Japanese. He ran his fingers across it. He didn't say anything, just looked at Mariko. She looked tired, not just physically. There was something behind her eyes, a quiet sorrow etched into the lines on her face. Her voice broke the silence again, mashed his gun in Keanu. He staggered back half a step. "Gone?" The words hit Keanu like a wave to the chest. He didn't react outwardly, but something in his posture collapsed. His shoulders sank. His grip on the music box tightened ever so slightly. No one spoke. Not Patricia, not Mason, not even Jonathan, who was always the first to break an uncomfortable silence. They all sensed the weight of what had just been said, even if they didn't understand it yet. Patricia stepped forward slowly, placing a gentle hand on Mariko's arm. "Please," she said, her voice calm and warm. "Stay. Come sit." Mariko hesitated. She looked at Keanu, waiting for a sign. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. She stepped into the garden, her black flats barely making a sound on the flagstone path. Patricia gestured to the seat beside her, clearing a space. Keanu remained standing. The music box sat in his hands like an artifact from a forgotten lifetime. Still, he didn't open it. "Who is Hana?" Mason finally asked. The boy looked between his uncle and the unfamiliar guest, confusion written across his face. "You said she wanted him to have it." Mariko turned to him gently. "She was someone very special." Keanu took a slow breath. "She was our daughter." A gasp escaped Patricia's lips. Her hand flew to her chest. Jonathan leaned forward. "Your daughter?" Keanu nodded. "I didn't know, not really, not until now, I guess." Mariko's voice cracked. "You did know, back then, but you never got the letter. I left it in your hotel, but the studio moved you before you saw it. I didn't have a phone number, no address, and when I found out you'd gone back to the States," her voice trailed off, "I assumed you didn't want to be found." Keanu closed his eyes. The garden around them seemed to fade. He remembered that winter in Tokyo, 28 years ago, the filming, the long hours, the arguments, the way she vanished without saying goodbye. At the time, he told himself it was just heartbreak. Life moved on. But now, a daughter? "I named her Hana," Mariko continued, voice shaking. "Cherry Blossom, because she came into this world quietly, gently, and she was gone too soon." Keanu sat down slowly, as if the weight in his chest became too much to bear. The box remained in his lap. He traced the cherry blossom carvings again. "She wanted you to have this. She made it herself, before she got sick." That sentence broke something in the silence. Patricia gently reached across and laid her fingers over the box too. Her eyes brimmed with tears. "Keanu, open it, sweetheart." His fingers found the small clasp. It clicked softly. The lid creaked open. Inside, nestled in pale pink silk, were three things: a stack of carefully folded letters tied with lavender ribbon, a small pendant shaped like a sakura petal, and a flash drive labeled in elegant handwriting. It read, "For my parents. Together." Keanu stared at the flash drive, the words blurring for a moment as emotion welled in his eyes. "For my parents. Together." He hadn't expected this, not today, not ever. A birthday dinner meant to celebrate his mother's quiet life had just cracked open a chapter of his own that he didn't even know existed. He reached for the letters first. The lavender ribbon trembled between his fingers as he gently untied the knot. The top envelope was addressed in beautiful cursive. "To Dad. Read this one first." He didn't open it. Not yet. His gaze moved to the pendant, sakura-shaped, delicate, impossibly detailed. He held it up in the fading light and watched as it shimmered faintly in the sun's final rays. Patricia leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. "She made this?" Mariko nodded. "She took up wood carving when she was 10, said it helped her breathe easier. She made one of those pendants for every patient in her ward, said cherry blossoms fall quickly, but while they're here, they bring beauty no one forgets." Keanu looked down again, struggling to steady his breath. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, not accusing, just lost. Mariko's hands folded in her lap. "I tried. Over the years I wrote, called, even came to LA once, but I wasn't sure you'd want to hear from me. After the diagnosis, Hana made the decision. She didn't want you to come out of obligation. She said, 'If he finds me, let it be because his heart leads him there, not guilt.'" Silence again. He swallowed hard. Patricia took his hand under the table. Her eyes were misted, but steady. Keanu, maybe this is her way of guiding you. Today, now. Mason leaned forward. What's on the flash drive? Mariko pulled something from her purse, a small tablet and an adapter. I didn't watch it. She told me not to. Said it was just for you and, if possible, for us, together. Keanu took the tablet and the drive. He hesitated, then plugged it in. The screen flickered. A loading icon spun, then faded into an image. A young woman, perhaps 25, with long dark hair and eyes that mirrored his own. She sat in a hospital room, sunlight pouring in through the blinds. Her smile was soft, tired, but radiant. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad, the girl said, voice trembling with hope. Everyone around the table leaned in. I don't know if you are watching this together, but I hope you are, because I need you to hear this, not just for me, but for each other. Keanu's breath caught. No, he whispered. Mariko nodded, one tear rolling down her cheek. I'll let her speak, she said, her voice breaking. But please, Keanu, don't walk away this time. Hana waited her whole life for this moment. And as Hana's voice filled the garden, time seemed to pause. The past had come knocking, and it brought a truth no one could ignore. The garden had gone still. No one moved. On the screen, Hana sat in a hospital bed, wearing a soft blue sweater and a necklace made of polished driftwood. Her voice was gentle, yet carried with surprising clarity. Her words were for them, for Keanu, for Mariko, for the story they never got to live, and the daughter they never got to raise together. I grew up in Kyoto, in a quiet little house near the temple path, Hana said. Mom always told me stories about you, Dad. She didn't speak badly of you. She said you were kind, thoughtful, funny, that you brought light into her world when everything felt like pressure and duty. She said you were the first man who ever made her believe love could be free. Keanu's fingers curled into his palm. I used to imagine what it would be like to meet you. I'd pretend you were traveling the world, making movies, helping people, riding motorcycles through the desert. I'd draw you in my sketchbooks. And when I got older, I stopped drawing and started building. The video shifted, overlaid with holographic imagery now. Soft ambient music played as diagrams and visual projections hovered over Hana's shoulders. I became obsessed with the ocean, not just the beauty of it, but the fact that it's dying. Coral reefs collapsing, species disappearing, and no one paying attention. I couldn't let that happen, so I studied. Hard. Robotics, biology, environmental science, and eventually, I built something. A family of AI-powered restoration bots. I called them Hanabai, short for Hana's Biotics. Mason's eyes widened. Patricia's breath hitched. The screen displayed small, glowing, jellyfish-like machines swimming through a coral bed, gently planting polyps and filtering pollutants. The colors were surreal, nature and technology in harmony. Keanu stared, not just in awe, but in disbelief. The girl in the video wasn't just his daughter. She was a visionary, a genius, and yet, he hadn't known her at all. I built these not just for the planet, Hana said softly, her smile fading, but because I wanted to do something that would make you both proud, something that might bring you back to the table, together. Her eyes shimmered, even if just once. Keanu blinked fast, but it didn't stop the tear that slid down his cheek. His voice cracked under his breath. I had a daughter. Mariko looked at him, her hand trembling in her lap. He turned toward her but didn't say anything more. His silence said enough. His world was shifting, a foundation cracking under the truth that had waited far too long. Keep watching, Mariko whispered. The next part of the video faded in. An earlier recording. Hana was younger here, maybe 17. She was on a rooftop at sunset, wind in her hair. Her laugh echoed before she spoke again. "This is my diary," she said. "Not the sad kind, the dreaming kind." And with that, her story truly began. On the screen, Hana's younger self leaned forward, her face lit by the soft glow of twilight. Behind her, the rooftops of Kyoto stretched toward the horizon, dotted with the silhouettes of ancient temples. Her voice was more playful here, tinged with hope and a quiet fire. "When I was little, I used to think the stars were messages from people we hadn't met yet," she said. "I'd lie on the tatami mat with Mom and ask, 'Do you think Dad is looking at the same sky right now?' She never said no. She'd just hold my hand and smile." Keanu's hands were folded tightly in his lap, the knuckles pale from pressure. The memory of that time, of Mariko's quiet departure after their final shoot in Tokyo, returned in fragments. He remembered chasing her through the neon-lit backstreets after a rap party. She had said nothing but goodbye. A week later, she was gone. He didn't know why. "I always wondered why you didn't come find us," Hana said. "But I never blamed you. I thought maybe you didn't know I existed. Or maybe you did, and life just got too complicated. I get it, life does that." Mariko lowered her eyes. "I should have told you sooner," she murmured. Keanu didn't respond. He couldn't. His jaw clenched as he focused on the screen. The holographic display changed again, now revealing sketches, early designs of the Hanabi bots, handwritten notes in Japanese and English, photos of coral reefs marked with color-coded overlays. Hana's voice continued. "I started building prototypes when I was 15, she explained. Mom worked 2 jobs just to buy me parts. When I got accepted to Osaka Institute of Technology, I promised her I'd change the world, or at least one corner of it." She laughed softly. "I know that sounds dramatic, but when you grow up hearing the ocean weep through the wind, you can't ignore it." Keanu's eyes remained fixed. Patricia gently reached over and touched his shoulder, grounding him. The next scene opened in a lab, modest but full of life. Hana stood beside a large tank filled with living coral and robotic organisms. She was wearing safety goggles and speaking to a camera. "Day 112 of trials," she said. "Hanabi 3.1 just restored its first dead reef segment without any external correction. That's a 96% autonomy success rate. If we scale this up, we can rebuild entire reef systems without human divers. No risks, no fossil fuel emissions, just renewal." She paused, then looked directly at the lens. "This is what I want to leave behind." Her voice lowered. "I didn't know how much time I had. But I knew this. If I couldn't meet you in person, Dad, I wanted you to meet the dream I carried. The one you helped create without even knowing." Keanu's shoulders dropped. A breath escaped from deep in his chest. "She was extraordinary," he whispered. Mariko closed her eyes. "She was yours." The screen faded to black for a moment. Then Hana reappeared, older again, likely recorded just months before her passing. Her features were thinner, more delicate, but her eyes still burned with clarity. This time, she sat beneath a blooming cherry tree, the petals drifting around her shoulders like falling snow. "I'm not sending this to you because I want anything," she said. "I've lived a good life. I've had love. I've had purpose. I had Mom, but I always felt like half of me was waiting." Keanu leaned forward, barely breathing. "I wanted to know you, not the actor, not the famous man, just the human being who once held my mother's heart. I used to wonder if you were as kind as she described. I'd tell myself, if I ever met you, I'd bring you here, to this very spot, let you see what I see, let you feel what I feel." The camera panned upward slowly, showing the tree's blossoms dancing in the wind. Then it turned, revealing a small stone bench beneath a memorial plaque. The inscription was simple: "Tomorrow's Oceans. Hana Reeves, Takahashi, 199620024." Beneath it, an engraved symbol, a small cherry blossom blooming beside a coral reef. Keanu's throat tightened. No one in the room spoke. Patricia pressed a tissue to her mouth. Even Mason, usually composed, looked shaken. Hana's voice returned, softer now. I named my bots after both of you. Hanabi stands for me, but also for Hanabi, the Japanese word for fireworks. A moment of beauty before the sky returns to silence. That's what life is, right? One flash of light. Make it count. Her eyes filled with emotion. If this is playing, then I'm gone. But I don't want this to be about sadness. I want it to be the beginning of something. She paused, looked directly into the camera. I know what you're thinking, Dad, that you missed everything, but I'm here to tell you, love isn't about time. It's about truth. And I always knew you were part of mine. Keanu's face collapsed inward, not into tears, but into something deeper. A quiet, devastating reverence. He pressed his hand to his chest, as if to hold in what was breaking. The screen displayed one last message in Hana's handwriting. Don't waste another second. The ocean still needs saving. So do we. Then the video ended. The room sat in stunned silence. For a moment, Keanu didn't move. Then he looked at Mariko. His voice was barely audible, a whisper, wrapped in wonder and grief. You changed the world, he said. Mariko nodded through tears. She tried to. He swallowed hard, eyes still on the darkened screen. I had a daughter, he repeated. Not as a question, not even as a revelation, but as a vow. And everything in him began to change. Keanu reached for the bundle of letters nestled beneath the flash drive inside the wooden music box. The paper was thin, hand-folded with precision. Each envelope was labeled with care. One marked Dad, the other Mom. A third simply read, Together. He held the first one, marked Dad, in his trembling hands. He opened it slowly, as if it might dissolve under too much pressure. The handwriting was unmistakably Hana's, rounded and elegant, shaped by years of discipline, but alive with feeling. Dear Dad, I know this letter will find you after I'm gone. I wish I could have looked you in the eyes just once. But maybe this is better. Maybe this gives you space to feel without the weight of the moment. First, I want you to know I never blamed you, not once. You didn't abandon me. You were simply left in the dark. I've lived my whole life wondering what you were like. Mom painted you in stories, how you'd drink tea with both hands like it was sacred, how you laughed too hard at bad jokes, how you never stopped fighting for the people you loved. I held on to those stories like they were photographs. I always believed you would have loved me if you'd known, and I believe you still can. By the time Keanu reached that last line, his eyes were glazed with quiet moisture. His jaw tensed. Across the room, Mariko sat frozen, her hands gripping her knees, bracing for her own letter. Greta turned to face. Hana's words continued. I got your stubbornness, by the way. Mom used to say I had your soul but her mouth. I don't know if that's a compliment or a warning. Maybe both. You should know something. I didn't just become a scientist. I became one because of you. Keanu blinked. He looked up. Your films, they shaped my understanding of bravery. Not the kind where you punch villains or outrun explosions. The kind where you choose silence instead of anger. The kind where you show up for people even when your heart's breaking. I used to watch them in secret. I'd imagine what it might have felt like to be hugged by someone who knew how to carry pain with dignity. Keanu slowly folded the letter closed. He couldn't read more. Not yet. But Mariko had already reached for hers. Her envelope opened with a soft rip. Her hands were steadier than she expected, her breath quiet as she unfolded the paper and began to read. Dear Mom, there aren't enough lifetimes to thank you, but if there's another one waiting somewhere, I hope we get to dance in it. You were my lighthouse, my shield, my everything. You showed me how a woman walks through fire and still gathers flowers. There were days your eyes looked so tired I thought they might shatter. But you never once made me feel like a burden. You made me feel chosen. Mariko inhaled sharply. Her lips trembled. I watched you sacrifice, again and again, and still find joy. That's not strength. It's a kind of magic. You gave me roots, he gave me dreams. Together, you gave me life. Mariko's hands lowered, the letter still clutched between her fingers, like a relic from another world. She looked at Keanu, tears streaking silently down her cheeks. He didn't speak. He couldn't. There was too much in the air between them. Grief, regret, wonder, and something slowly blooming underneath it all. Forgiveness. But there was one letter left. Keanu gently lifted the final envelope, the one labeled Together. He glanced at Mariko. She nodded once, and he carefully broke the seal. Dear Mom and Dad, if you're reading this together, it means my plan worked. It means I finally found a way to get you in the same room without anyone slamming a door. Keanu almost smiled, the faintest flicker. I have spent my whole life loving you both in different ways, one through stories, the other through sacrifices. But even without knowing each other, you shaped me in harmony. Like two notes in a song that only I could hear. You should know, I didn't just work on AI or robotics because it was cutting edge. I did it because I wanted to solve the kind of problems that separate people. Borders, time, distance, grief. I built Hana by not just to clean coral reefs, but because I believed that every problem on this planet, including the broken ones inside our homes, can be mended with beauty and persistence. And love. Keanu's throat clenched. The room had gone utterly still. There's something else I have to say. Something I didn't tell even Mom until the very end. By the time I knew I was sick, it was too late. It started with fatigue, then dizziness. I chalked it up to work stress, but it was leukemia, and it was fast, too fast. So I had to make choices, big ones. I could have spent my last months fighting in a hospital bed, but I didn't want my last moments to be filled with tubes and countdowns. I wanted to spend them finishing this gift. For you. This box, this diary, these letters, they're not just for closure. They're a blueprint for how to begin again. Keanu's hand trembled as he reached the final lines. I don't need you to love each other like you did before, but I do need you to forgive each other, to honor the best of what you were, because that best became me. And if there's any strength in my legacy, it came from you both. So I'm asking you, my dream is for you to finish what I started. Together. Mariko covered her mouth with her hand. A soft, involuntary sob escaped, not of despair, but of overwhelming love. Keanu closed the letter slowly. The silence that followed was sacred. Then Patricia stood up from the table. Her movements were slow but purposeful. She walked around, placed her hands gently on Mariko's shoulders, and said in a warm, resolute voice, "Your family now." And Mariko broke completely. Keanu looked at them both. He hadn't felt this much in one room in decades. And Hana, gone yet fully present, had brought it all to life. Keanu stood motionless, the letter still in his hand. Around him, the room held its breath. Walls that had once been quiet witnesses to family dinners, birthdays, holidays, now echoing with something deeper. The weight of an entire life never known, yet now unfolding like a sacred story told backwards. He looked at Mariko. She met his gaze through glassy eyes. Her voice was fragile but steady. "What should I told you?" she whispered. I tried. So many times. But every time I picked up the phone, I thought, what if you were happy? What if I ruined that? Keanu didn't respond at first. He stepped closer and sat beside her. Their knees nearly touched. I was never whole, he finally said. I just didn't know why. Patricia quietly left the room, giving them space. Everyone else faded into the background. This was no longer a dinner party. It had become a reckoning. A reunion written in ink and pain and hope. Mariko reached into her coat and pulled out a small velvet pouch. She placed it between them. "I wasn't going to bring this," she said, "but Hana asked me to." Inside was a delicate gold necklace. Simple, elegant. On it hung a charm shaped like an infinity symbol, its edges engraved with microscopic text. Keanu tilted it toward the light. The engraving read, "For my family. Unbroken, no matter the time lost." He looked at it for a long time before sliding it into his palm. It wasn't just jewelry. It was an heirloom, passed forward by someone who had no future left. They sat in silence for what felt like an hour. No script, no rush. Just the slow unfolding of an understanding that defied the years they'd missed. Then Keanu finally spoke again. "I want to know her," he said. "All of her, everything." Mariko nodded. She reached for the flash drive and handed it to him. "She documented everything," she said. "Her lab notes, her video logs, even her music compositions. She built an archive. It's all in there. It's her entire world." Keanu held the drive as if it contained fire. That night, he didn't sleep. He stayed up with the flash drive playing on his laptop, headphones in, eyes locked to the screen. And there she was, Hana, alive in pixels, speaking softly in a lab, laughing as wind tousled her hair on a coral reef dive, dancing alone in a white hallway, twirling like she had all the time in the world. He watched her grow backwards, from a confident, mission-driven woman to a curious, brilliant girl. And in those fragments, he saw both himself and Mariko. Mannerisms, smiles, even the way she paused to think. Just like him. But it was her voice, steady and luminous, that he heard in his head long after the screen went dark. "I love you, both of you, so much." The pain of never having held her as a child would never leave. But now, he had something else. He had her legacy, and a promise to fulfill. The morning sun poured through the windows of Keanu's quiet home, casting warm streaks of light across the kitchen table. Keanu sat with the flash drive still plugged into his laptop, and Mariko beside him. Her hands were folded, her face expressionless, but her eyes darted across the screen as Hana's holographic diary continued to play. This entry was different. It wasn't emotional, not like the earlier recordings. It was scientific. Clinical, even. Hana wore a lab coat, her hair pulled back into a tight bun, and stood in front of a high-tech display glowing with oceanic schematics. "Reef Heart Protocol," she began, voice steady, eyes burning with conviction. "It's the culmination of everything I've studied since I was 11. AI-directed bioswarms that can identify, clean, and regrow coral structures in hostile marine zones. My first prototypes are operational. If you're watching this, that means I'm gone, but they're still working, and they still need help." She stepped aside to reveal a map of Okinawa's southern reef system, dotted with tiny glowing nodes. "Teeth," she continued, pointing, "are the reef hearts. Nanobot collectives bonded with biopolymer coral skeletons. They mimic natural coral growth using recycled calcium carbonate and microbial scaffolding. Think of them like coral gardeners that never sleep." The screen paused on a still frame, an underwater video of the reef hearts weaving glowing threads across a dying coral outcrop, restoring color and life in waves. Mariko leaned back, stunned. "She built this herself?" Keanu nodded slowly, and no one knew. "She was 23, Mariko whispered. "My God." He opened another file. This one was a scanned letter. Hana's handwriting precise and looped, familiar now, like an echo from a dream. "Dear Mom and Dad, I know this sounds huge, maybe even crazy, but the reef hearts are real, they work. They're slow and fragile and still learning, But they're alive, and they need someone to protect them. The ocean needs someone to protect them. You both gave me life. In different ways, this project is my way of giving life back. Please, don't let it end with me." Keanu read the words silently again, then closed the laptop gently. "I want to see them," he said. Mariko's breath caught. "In Okinawa?" "Yes," he replied. "If they're still out there, we owe it to her to keep them alive." Mariko rubbed her temple. "Keanu, we're not scientists, we're not engineers. I'm an art curator. You're an actor. How can we possibly—" But her voice drifted off. The last few days had upended everything. There was no going back to normal. Keanu didn't flinch. "Then we become whatever she needs us to be." The silence between them was heavier now, but not hopeless. It held a new weight, a responsibility neither had asked for, but both now felt in their bones. He rose from the table and reached for the phone. "I'll book 2 tickets to Okinawa," he said. "We'll figure out the rest when we get there." 2 days later, they stood on the shore of Okinawa, waves whispering at their feet, the sky bruised with clouds. The air smelled of salt and history. Keanu wore a windbreaker and a backpack with Hana's flash drive zipped securely inside. Mariko clutched a laminated map Hana had once mailed to a research contact. Coordinates marked in red pen, surrounded by tiny handwritten notes in Japanese and English. "Yeche tableak, tsikani saidia, tsikani ne." This was her sanctuary, Mariko murmured, eyes scanning the horizon. She used to come here alone as a teenager. Said the ocean felt more honest than people. Keanu looked out at the water, quiet. A fisherman passed nearby with a bucket of wriggling mackerel and gave them a curious glance. "Are you tourists?" the man asked in Japanese. Mariko responded, her tone respectful but assertive. "We're here for the reef, the one near Cape Maeda. We have a map." The fisherman frowned. "That place? It's not safe anymore. Strong currents and strange machines in the water. Some say it's haunted." Keanu's ears perked up. "Machines?" The man shrugged. "Little lights, like fireflies. No sound. Been there for a year now. Divers avoid it, but the coral, it's been growing back. People don't understand how." Mariko exchanged a stunned glance with Keanu. "It's still working," she whispered. "Her reef hearts are still active." They hired a local guide and dove the next morning, strapping into wetsuits and descending carefully with borrowed equipment. Visibility was poor at first, the ocean murky from recent storms. But 20 meters down, just past the canyon shelf, they saw it. A glow, soft and pulsing. Dozens of luminous threads wove in and out of coral clusters, like living embroidery. The reef, once bleached and gray, now shimmered with pockets of orange, violet, and gold. It looked like someone had poured stardust into the water. Keanu paused mid-swim. His breathing slowed. They hovered together, weightless, watching the reefy hearts at work. Tiny pods, no bigger than golf balls, moved in coordinated patterns. Some carried fragments of calcified coral, others scrubbed sediment from the reef's surface. A few danced in slow spirals, almost like they recognized them. Mariko raised her underwater camera and recorded everything, her fingers trembling. Then, as they rose back to the boat, Keanu broke the surface and gasped, not from exhaustion, but awe. "He built a miracle," he said, "and no one saw it." Mariko pulled off her mask. "They will now." They sat in silence on the deck, sun-drying salt water from their skin. A school of fish darted below the boat, in silver flashes. Keanu turned to her. "What if they fail without her?" Mariko's answer came after a long breath. "Then we learn, we study, we protect them until someone smarter takes over." He looked down at his hands, weathered but steady. "She wanted us to finish what she started, together." "And we will," Mariko said, softer this time. "We owe her that much." Back at the rental house, the floor was covered in maps, notebooks, and printed stills from the dive camera. Keanu sat cross-legged, reviewing Hana's handwritten notes again. Each page was dated, marked with timestamps and sketches of nanobot configurations. Her voice echoed faintly from the flash drive on loop, giving soft-spoken commentary on the reef's temperature changes, chemical readings, and regeneration progress. Mariko stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes glassy. She did all of this alone? Keanu glanced up. No, he said firmly. She didn't want to be alone. She just didn't know how to bring us back into her world. Mariko nodded, voice tight. She was always afraid of disrupting other people's peace. Even when she was dying, she still tried to carry everything on her own. Keanu stared at the reef art schematic. And yet she believed in us enough to leave us this. The next day, they met with Dr. Saito, Hana's former mentor, at the University of Tokyo's Marine Lab. He was a thin, silver-haired man with sharp eyes and a gentle demeanor. When Keanu introduced himself, the man's face paled slightly. Hana spoke of you, he said quietly. She called you her lighthouse. Said your calm was what gave her clarity in chaos. She inherited that from you. Mariko blinked rapidly. And from me? Saito smiled gently. She said your mind was the blade that carved the path. She worshipped you both, in her own quiet way. They shared a moment of silence. Dr. Saito reviewed the footage from their dive. His fingers trembled as he paused a frame showing 3 reef hearts, clustering to repair a damaged coral branch. Peace. They've adapted, he said. The AI has learned behaviors beyond the original programming. This is evolutionary development. Autonomous ecological reasoning. In English? Keanu asked. They're learning how to save the reef without human guidance, Saito said, eyes wide. But they won't survive without someone monitoring environmental conditions, providing code patches, ensuring balance. Mariko closed her eyes. So they need a team, Saito nodded. Or a family willing to become one. That night, Keanu sat on the porch, with the ocean whispering in the distance. He held one of Hana's last letters. It was simple, written in fading ink. I know I'm leaving too soon. But if love is real, maybe it doesn't end. It just changes form. I leave you this reef, this living thing, because it's where I felt closest to both of you. Be kind to each other. The ocean forgives everything. He folded the letter slowly, holding it to his chest. Inside, Mariko was on the phone with a robotics foundation in Kyoto. Her voice was clear, decisive, asking for funding, collaboration, and space for a legacy project. When she hung up, she looked at Keanu. We have a chance, she said. Keanu stood, walked to her, and said, Then we start tomorrow. Together, they stepped into Hana's world, 2 grieving parents transformed by loss into something larger than themselves. The plane descended into Kyoto as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the city's tiled rooftops and cherry blossom-lined alleys. Keanu sat by the window, eyes fixed on the horizon, but his mind was elsewhere, drifting somewhere between the past he never knew and the grief that now pressed on his chest like a weight too heavy to speak of. Mariko reached across the aisle and gently touched his hand. Neither said a word. Some silences hold more than language ever could. They took a taxi through the quiet back streets of Jian, passing the red lanterns swaying in the wind and the soft hum of old jazz spilling from a second-floor cafe. Eventually, the cab stopped outside a modest, 2-story building nestled between a bookstore and a pottery shop. This was her place, Mariko said softly. She insisted on living independently, even when the doctors told her it was time to rest. Keanu stepped out slowly. The building looked almost suspended in time. The mailbox still bore Hana's name in English and Japanese. The front door hadn't been opened in months. Inside, the air was still but not stale. It smelled faintly of sandalwood and old paper. The walls were white, unadorned, but her personality bloomed in every corner. There were books stacked neatly along the wall, marine biology journals, quantum computing manuals, Japanese poetry, A small potted bonsai tree stood by the window, alive but slightly untrimmed. Its crooked shape felt oddly symbolic. Origami cranes hung from strings along the ceiling, delicate and fluttering gently with the motion of their steps. There were hundreds, each folded with exact precision, made from recycled coral, monitoring reports. Keanu reached out and touched one, his fingers shaking slightly. The living room table was covered with blueprints, detailed schematics of the Reef Heart nanobots, notes in her handwriting. Version 7.3, adaptation threshold increased, add empathy filter to AI core, send data to Dr. Saito before May 8. On the far end of the room sat a small wooden shrine. It wasn't for Hana. It was one she'd built in honor of her grandparents, complete with candles, incense, and family photographs. Keanu looked at the arrangement in silence, then noticed something else tucked underneath a folded cloth. A flash drive. Mariko saw it at the same time. She looked over at him, her expression unreadable. She didn't tell me about another message. Keanu picked it up carefully, almost reverently. His hands were steady, but his chest burned with a pressure he couldn't name. He plugged it into the laptop sitting closed on the corner desk. The screen flickered to life, and the room dimmed. A black screen, then Hana appeared. She was seated in this very room, hair tied loosely back, face pale but still glowing with strength. The timestamp read just 5 weeks before her passing. "If you're watching this," she began, "then that means you came. That means you chose love." Keanu inhaled sharply, his throat tightening as the message continued. Hana's voice echoed softly through the apartment, each syllable carrying a mixture of wisdom and weariness far beyond her years. "I don't know what you're feeling right now," she said, smiling faintly. "Maybe angry, maybe numb, maybe both. I get it. Life threw us into separate orbits, and I guess I was the only one who saw the constellation we were meant to be." Keanu sat motionless, eyes locked on the screen. Mariko stood behind him, a hand lightly resting on his shoulder, as if afraid that letting go would make Hana disappear again. "I used to imagine what you were like," Hana continued. "Mom told me stories about your quiet strength, your kindness, how you listen more than you talk. I used to wonder if I got my stillness from you. And maybe my stubbornness too." She chuckled softly. It hurt to hear. "I didn't want to burden you. That's why I didn't reach out sooner. But when the doctors told me, when they said I had months, maybe less, I decided that love didn't need permission." Keanu's jaw clenched, his hand covering his mouth to quiet the sob rising inside him. "So I created something," Hana said. "A message, a mission, a dream. Not just for the reefs or the oceans, but for the people who made me, you and Mom. You don't know it, but you're still part of the same story. My story. And I didn't want it to end with a full stop. I wanted a comma, a continuation." She paused and leaned closer to the camera, her expression growing serious. "Dad, if you're here, if you found this, then I need you to know that I never blamed you, not once. You didn't fail me. Life just hid me from you. But now, I'm giving us back to each other." Keanu broke. Silent tears slipped down his cheeks, one after the other, as he reached toward the screen, fingertips brushing against the air. "I love you," Hana whispered. "I always did. Even when you were just a name on a movie poster or a face on TV. I loved you." She picked up a coral-shaped pendant from around her neck and held it toward the camera. "This is for you. Mom has the real one. Wear it when you go to the ocean. It responds to the bots. It's like a key." Mariko gasped quietly behind him. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the very pendant, still warm from her hand. It shimmered faintly in the afternoon light. "I wish I had more time," Hana said. "But you do. You both do. So go. Live. Finish the work. Finish the love. The screen went black. No music. No fade. Just stillness. Keanu sat frozen. Then, slowly, he leaned forward, placed his hands over his face, and began to cry. Deep, aching sobs that came from a place too long sealed off. Outside, the wind rustled the cherry trees. Inside, something sacred had finally broken open. The silence after the video felt heavier than any words. Keanu remained crouched on the floor, his arms draped over his knees, his breath slowing in jagged patterns. The grief wasn't just about loss. It was about time. Time he never had with Hana. Time he thought he had with Mariko. Time that vanished the moment she said goodbye all those years ago. Mariko didn't speak. She simply knelt beside him, her hand gently brushing his shoulder. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, there were no accusations between them. Only grief. Only the shared ache of a love lost and a daughter found too late. He looked around the apartment again, at the folded cranes perched on every shelf, the notebooks with Hana's elegant handwriting, and the tiny jars of coral dust labeled by date and location. Everything was precise, purposeful. She had turned her small world into a cathedral of meaning. Keanu rose slowly and crossed to the window. Outside, Kyoto bustled on as if nothing had changed, but everything had. He pressed his palm to the glass, watching the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk. For a moment, he imagined Hana there. Not in a hologram, not in a recording, just there. Laughing, waving, smiling like she had her mother's eyes and maybe, just maybe, his soul. He whispered to the glass, "I'm sorry." And somehow, in the stillness that followed, he imagined she heard it. Mariko joined him at the window, holding the coral pendant in her hands. Her voice broke the quiet. "She wanted us to continue her work, Keanu. But I don't know if I have it in me." He turned toward her, eyes still red but steadier now. "You already did the impossible. You raised her. You raised someone who changed the world, even if no one saw it yet." Mariko's lips trembled. "But I kept her from you, and I lost you both," he replied softly. "But that's not where the story ends. She didn't want us to stay buried in regret." They looked down at the pendant between them. It was shaped like a blooming coral, the outer arms spiraling in delicate fractals. Hana had crafted it herself, blending organic curves with micro-engineered detail. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a bridge. Between worlds. Between people. Keanu took it gently from her hands. "She said it responds to the bots." Mariko nodded. "It activates their navigation protocol." She called it the key to the reef's memory. He held the pendant to his chest. "Then we go." "To Okinawa?" Mariko asked. "No," Keanu said, voice deep, resolute. "To where she began, to where she lives now, in everything she left behind." In that moment, the ghosts they carried no longer felt like burdens. They felt like guides. Outside, the wind shifted direction. Inside, 2 parents stood at the edge of redemption, holding the remnants of a daughter's dream, and preparing to step into it together. The foundation didn't have a name at first. It didn't need one. Keanu just called it Hana's work, and Mariko simply nodded. Within 2 weeks of returning from Kyoto, they were back in Los Angeles, transforming the unused guest house behind Keanu's property into a makeshift laboratory. The walls were soon covered in whiteboards filled with Hana's sketches, formulae, and scanned notes from the flash drive. Keanu funded everything himself. No donors, no government grants. He didn't want red tape, and more importantly, he didn't want anyone else defining the mission. This wasn't for publicity or for legacy. It was for Hana. Mariko reached out to a few of her old colleagues from Kyoto University and MIT, quiet, brilliant minds she trusted. A former student named Dr. Lena Ito flew in within days, bringing with her a portable DNA printer, advanced AI modeling software, and a heart full of reverence for Hana's work. She had read Hana's academic blog under the pseudonym Blue Nova for years, but never knew the face behind it. They spent hours poring over Hanu's refart protocol. The AI was beyond anything currently in use. Adaptive, recursive, and emotionally tagged. Hana had coded the system to feel the urgency of decay, to respond to environmental despair like it was personal. Every nanobot in the swarm carried a data signature that included not just instructions, but intention. "This was more than science," Lena whispered one night as they studied the swarm's behavioral modeling. She gave them empathy. Keanu stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the simulation. She gave them what the world forgot. The first task was locating the original swarm. According to Hana's letter, she had launched the prototypes off the southern coast of Okinawa, near a reef that had been declared ecologically dead 10 years earlier. No biodiversity, no coral growth. A graveyard under the sea. Mariko had doubts. If they're still functioning, they've been doing it silently. There'd be no way to prove it. But proof came in the most unexpected way. A diver in Okinawa posted a short video on social media, a personal clip showing patches of bioluminescent coral blooming in geometric shapes, spiral clusters, fractal fields, pulsing lines of color. The internet took it as an oddity. The diver called them ghost gardens, but Lena recognized the pattern instantly. So did Mariko. "Hana's reefs," she whispered. Keanu's hand closed around the pendant at his chest. It vibrated faintly, reacting to something neither of them could see, but all of them could feel. Within hours, the video went viral. News outlets called, asking if the footage was real. Marine biologists weighed in, some skeptical, others stunned. One headline read, "Dead reef comes back to life. No one knows how." Keanu refused interviews. So did Mariko. But they worked faster, because Hana had spoken, and the ocean had answered. The next morning, Keanu and Mariko met with Lena in the converted lab. The atmosphere was tense, but it wasn't fear. It was urgency. Something had shifted. The world had seen a glimpse of what Hana had hidden. And now the question wasn't if the reef heart bots were alive, but how long they could remain so without help. Mariko loaded a sonar map of the Okinawan reef onto the screen. It revealed thermal inconsistencies, faint electromagnetic pulses beneath the surface, activity that should have been impossible in a dead reef. Hana had embedded the bots with micro-beacon signals that would only activate if their energy dropped below 20%. According to the scans, the signals had just barely triggered. "They're still operational," Lena said, almost in disbelief. "But they're dying." Keanu didn't flinch. "Then we go there." Mariko turned to him. "You don't have to do this. This isn't a movie set, Keanu. This is the ocean. Real risk." "I know," he replied. "But Hana left this for us. And she didn't ask for perfect people. She asked for parents." Lena looked between them, her voice quiet. "We'll need equipment. Submersibles, AI interface rigs, drone relays, a base of operations. We'll get what we need," Keanu said. "I'll call a friend with a private dock in Okinawa." True to his word, Keanu tapped into every resource he had. A logistics company he'd once invested in rerouted cold duster drone tech to Okinawa. An old film crew underwater coordinator provided refurbished diving suits and a pressurized container to serve as a field lab. By the end of the week, they had assembled what Mariko half-jokingly called the Quiet Avengers. But the project wasn't quiet anymore. One night, as Mariko reviewed Hana's source code, a journalist from an eco-tech publication sent a message requesting comment. Attached was a photograph. It showed a young Okinawan girl snorkeling with her father. They were surrounded by glowing coral, and in the background, an AI-assisted drone hovered silently, unnoticed. The journalist's caption read, "Unidentified technology found off Miyakojima Island. Is nature making a comeback?" Mariko showed the image to Keanu. His breath caught. "That's one of hers," he whispered, pointing to the drone. "That's Reef Heart Model 4. They realized then that Hana's work had quietly entered the world, not just as theory or legacy, but as living code. As organisms, adapting and responding. They weren't merely rebuilding coral, they were rewriting what people believed was possible. Lena sat beside them, overcome with emotion. She didn't just dream this, she built it, and it's working. Keanu nodded. But it won't last without us. The ocean's warming, storm season's coming. They'll need reinforcements. He looked toward the Pacific through the lab's glass doors. Sheem gave us a map, he said softly. Now it's our turn to follow it. Weeks passed, and the foundation, now officially named the Hana Project, gained momentum. What started as a secret tribute between two grieving parents had begun to evolve into a movement. Keanu and Mariko weren't just reclaiming Hana's technology, they were reigniting her purpose. In the heart of Okinawa, they rented a small coastal property that overlooked the reef where Hana's bots were still active. It wasn't glamorous, just an aging wooden house once used by marine biologists, but it had one critical feature: proximity to the living experiment. Every morning, they walked to the shore and watched the water, waiting for signals. And every afternoon, they launched small drones into the current to retrieve diagnostic data. Mariko grew more confident with each passing day. She was no longer the reluctant scientist unsure of her place in her daughter's legacy. She was becoming a leader, interpreting Hana's neural networks, patching gaps in her evolving AI model, and speaking with volunteers who wanted to learn. Meanwhile, Keanu focused on infrastructure. He organized shipments of solar power units, negotiated with locals to protect the site from fishing activity, and personally funded waterproof charging buoys designed to keep the bots alive through typhoons. His celebrity attracted media attention, but he used it sparingly, only when it could protect the reef or amplify Hana's work without overshadowing her. One night, as the moonlight shimmered across the waves, Keanu and Mariko stood quietly on the deck, watching bioluminescent flashes ripple beneath the surface. "That's them," Mariko said. Keanu nodded, like she's still here. "Sheem is," Mariko whispered. "In the code. In the current." Just then, Lena rushed out with a tablet in her hand, breathless. "You need to see this." She pulled up a live stream. It was a drone camera, scanning a section of the reef they hadn't monitored in days, and what it showed took their breath away. The coral had formed into patterns, geometric, deliberate, unmistakable. A spiral. Keanu leaned closer. "That's Hana's signature. She used to draw that when she was a kid." Mariko wiped her eyes. "She taught it to the bots," Lena whispered. "She left her name in the reef." The next day, the footage went viral. The spiral reef was labeled online as the signature of Hana, and thousands of users began asking where it was, who built it, and how it was possible. Media agencies from across the world requested interviews. Environmentalists, tech experts, and even school children started calling it the miracle of Miyakojima. But Keanu and Mariko kept one truth to themselves. This wasn't a miracle, it was a message. A daughter's posthumous whisper to her parents. A plea not to stop at loss, but to build through it. Keanu closed his eyes that night and silently made a promise. They wouldn't let the world turn Hana's dream into a spectacle. They would protect it. They would become it. The morning air in Okinawa was softer than expected, filled with the scent of salt and hibiscus as Keanu stood outside the makeshift lab, sipping coffee from a chipped ceramic mug. Inside, the quiet hum of machines processing ocean data had become a kind of lullaby. But today, that rhythm was broken by a new voice. Ava. She arrived without warning, her long brown hair swept into a ponytail and eyes full of mischief and purpose. Keanu's goddaughter hadn't visited in over a year, caught up in her own environmental projects and university life. But when she saw the vile reef spiral and read Hannah's story, she didn't hesitate. She bought a one-way ticket. "I figured you'd need someone who knows how to code and swim," Ava said, standing at the door with a waterproof laptop bag and a pair of diving fins strapped to her backpack. "Everything depended on Keanu smiled, his eyes both amused and deeply moved. "You figured right." "I hardly know." From the moment she stepped in, Ava brought an energy no one realized was missing. Within hours, she was adapting Hana's swarm behavior algorithms, running simulations, and even setting up a digital dashboard that allowed their team to monitor the REFAR nodes in real time. She also wasn't shy about asking Mariko direct questions, or teasing Keanu when he forgot to sleep. Patricia, who had arrived just days earlier to offer moral support, quickly took on a role of quiet coordinator. She didn't understand the technical jargon, but she knew how to take care of people. She prepared meals, organized schedules, and mediated the subtle tensions that surfaced between Keanu and Mariko. Her presence brought calm. "Mom, you've become the project manager," Keanu joked one night over dinner. Patricia just smiled and handed him a list. "Then I need you to order more coffee. You're drinking it like water." Mariko, who had spent most of her adult life working alone, found herself surrounded by a makeshift family she wasn't sure how to read. Ava's sarcasm caught her off guard. Patricia's gentle prodding into her personal life made her nervous. But she never once felt excluded. They treated her with warmth, and slowly, something inside her began to soften. One afternoon, Patricia found her standing in the garden behind the house, staring at the horizon. "It's strange," Mariko said. "Being here, with all of you." "It's not strange," Patricia replied. "It's healing. I'm not sure what my place is." Patricia tilted her head. "You're Hana's mother. That makes you family. And family isn't a place, it's a choice." Those words stayed with Mariko. In the lab, she noticed Keanu growing more quiet as the days passed. Not cold, just deliberate. They shared duties fluidly, reading Hana's notes, coordinating with local divers, responding to increasing media inquiries. But when the work ended, so did the conversation. They never touched. They never lingered. It was a professional rhythm. It was survival. But Hana had left them something else. A letter, handwritten and tucked between the folds of her lab journal, found by Ava in the drawer of the reef mapping station. Ava read it first. Her voice trembled as she handed the note to Keanu, eyes shimmering. "I didn't want to intrude," she said softly, "but I think she meant it for both of you." The paper had been folded 3 times, the ink still bold and steady. "Dear Mom and Dad, if you're reading this, it means you're still working together. That alone makes me smile. I always imagined you'd be a great team. One steady and silent like the roots of a mountain, the other brilliant and brave like firelight in a storm. That's how I saw you both growing up. I never needed to see you together to know that you belonged side by side. Maybe this is selfish. Maybe it's unfair to ask something so big after I'm gone. But if you do only one thing for me, try. Try to remember what made you smile. Try to let go of the people you were and meet each other as who you are now. And maybe, just maybe, you'll remember how to dance. With all my love, Hana." Keanu stared at the letter long after he finished reading it. He didn't speak. He didn't move. The words had broken something open, something he'd kept barricaded behind focus and duty since Mariko returned. That line, "Remember how to dance." It wasn't metaphorical to him. He remembered the dance. It was on a rooftop in Shinjuku in 1996, under paper lanterns during a cast rap party, A quiet jazz band had played. He had been clumsy, and Mariko had laughed and pulled him closer until he followed her lead. It was the moment he knew he loved her. He hadn't thought of it in decades. Mariko didn't speak either. Her eyes were glassy. She stepped outside to sit in the courtyard, letting the cicadas fill the silence between her breaths. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the letter, reading it again and again. Inside the house, Ava looked at Patricia. "Do you think they'll ever forgive each other?" Patricia didn't answer immediately. She sipped her tea, watching through the open screen door. "I don't think forgiveness works like a switch," she said eventually. "Sometimes it's not about letting go. It's about holding on to what matters more. And what's that? The person still standing in front of you." The rest of the week flowed in quiet harmony. Keanu and Mariko didn't suddenly become close, but they stopped avoiding each other. They began eating meals at the same table again. When they disagreed on technical approaches, they debated respectfully. When Mariko laughed at one of Ava's jokes, Keanu's lips lifted just slightly. One morning, Patricia left a playlist playing softly in the background, jazz from the 90s, drifting gently through the lab as if by accident. Mariko paused mid-keystroke. Keanu looked up from a data printout. Their eyes met. Neither said a word, but the silence felt different this time, like music with a memory in it. On a warm Sunday morning, they took a break from the lab and drove to the coast, Ava's idea. The ocean breeze rolled through the open car windows, and for the first time in weeks, no one talked about biobot calibration, reef mapping, or press briefings. They walked the shoreline in silence, just watching the waves. Mariko collected small shells absently. Keanu skipped a stone so far it vanished into the horizon. Ava and Patricia stayed behind, giving them space without saying they were doing so. They reached a rocky outcrop and paused, the crash of water echoing below. Mariko clutched a small glass vial in her hand. Inside was coral dust collected from Hana's Okinawan test reef. A fragment of a dream, preserved. He held out his hand. She gave it to him without hesitation. They didn't speak. He removed the cap and tipped it gently into the wind. The coral powder caught the sun, sparkling briefly before the ocean took it. "Sheem would have loved this view," Mariko whispered. "She still does," Keanu replied quietly. They stood there for a long time, shoulder to shoulder. Back at the house, Patricia was rearranging framed photos. One was a new addition, a candid picture of Ava, Mariko, and Keanu in the lab, all three leaning over a schematic, mid-la. It wasn't planned, it wasn't polished, but it felt real. Above it, Patricia pinned Hana's letter, framed in simple wood. The subtitle etched beneath it, "The dance isn't over." That evening, Keanu made dinner. Ava helped him chop vegetables while Mariko arranged plates. It wasn't a grand reunion, it wasn't loud or tearful, but it was something better. It was normal. Between bites, Ava asked, "So, are you going to name the next reef?" Keanu paused. Mariko looked at him, half smiling. He raised his glass and said, "Hana's heart." The name caught in the air like a blessing. They clinked their glasses in unison. Later that night, when the house had gone quiet and only the hum of distant waves filled the air, Keanu stepped onto the back porch. Mariko joined him. They stood beneath the stars, not touching, not talking. Then, slowly, gently, Mariko reached for his hand. He let her. There was no music playing, but their feet moved just slightly, almost imperceptibly. A step forward, a shift back, not quite dancing, but close enough. The boat rocked gently on the waters of Okinawa as the early morning light filtered through pale clouds. Keanu stood at the edge, staring into the crystalline blue below. The gear felt heavier than it used to. Age, maybe. Or perhaps it was the weight of memory, of everything left unsaid for too long. Mariko stood beside him, tightening her wetsuit with a calm, practiced grace. The sea had been her element once, before she became a mother, before the loss, before life twisted them into strangers with a shared ache. The dive team from Kyoto University had arrived earlier that morning, young, bright-owned oceanographers who had grown up reading about Hana's theoretical models in scientific journals. Now, they were here to witness the miracle in motion, to see whether Reef Heart was real and still alive. No fanfare, no press, just one quiet mission: descend to Hana's reef and find what she left behind. Keanu checked his mask, then turned to Mariko. She nodded. No words passed between them. They dropped into the water, one by one, disappearing beneath the surface in slow, fluid arcs. The ocean enveloped them instantly, cool, endless, and humming with life. Visibility was clear, almost unnaturally so, as they swam downward. Rays of sunlight sliced through the blue like searchlights. Small fish darted past in bursts of silver. And then it appeared. At first, just patches of coral, vibrant, alive, thriving in impossible patterns. Then the structures revealed themselves. Towers of living reef, symmetrical and spiraling, not shaped by tides or chance, but by intent. Hana's intent. Mariko slowed as she took in the reef's formation. It was unmistakably her daughter's design, patterns woven from the Fibonacci sequence, spirals growing out of artificial nodes. But it wasn't cold. It wasn't robotic. It pulsed with life. A small metallic glimmer caught Keanu's eye. He swam closer and found it. One of the bots, lodged into the reef like a living barnacle, its surface weathered by salt but still active. He reached toward it gently. The moment his glove brushed the surface, it responded. A soft hum, a light. Then a small beam projected upward from the bot, forming a translucent, flickering hologram. It was her face. Who was killed, Hana's? Young, alive, smiling. Even underwater, the effect was overwhelming. Keanu's breath caught in his mask. Beside him, Mariko pressed her hand over her heart and trembled. Her body curled slightly as her breath left her in sobs. Her daughter had encoded herself into them, not just as code or function, but as presence, as memory, as love. The rest of the team hovered back, giving them space. Keanu reached out again. The hologram flickered, and Hana's image turned toward him, tilting slightly as if aware of his presence. No voice, no sound. Just the knowing smile of a girl who had made peace with her end and left behind the beginning of something far greater. Keanu slowly rose to the surface, breaking through with a gasp that felt like it came from deep inside his soul. When Mariko followed, she removed her mask and cried openly, her tears blending with the sea. He said nothing. She said nothing. But they both knew Hana was still here, still building, still watching. The research boat was quiet when they climbed back aboard. No one spoke, not even the young divers who had witnessed the moment. The air felt thick with something unspoken, as if the sea itself had handed them a sacred truth. Keanu sat on the edge of the deck, still dripping, eyes fixed on the horizon. The image of Hana's face hovering in the deep haunted him, but not in a way that hurt. It was gentle, like she had reached through time and technology to remind them both of what truly mattered. Mariko paced a few steps behind him, wrapped in a towel, arms folded tight. Her mind was racing, calculations, implications, questions, but for once she let them drift away. For once she allowed herself to just feel. She crouched down beside Keanu, their shoulders almost touching, but not quite. "Spilled more than we imagined," Mariko whispered. He nodded. "She built a legacy." Mariko wiped her eyes. "Do you think she knew we'd come?" Keanu glanced at her, and for a moment the distance between them blurred. She didn't hope. She trusted. That word landed hard. Trusted. Despite their past, despite their failures, despite the ocean of time and pain between them, Hana had trusted they'd find each other again and find their way to what she had left behind. One of the divers approached, quietly clearing his throat. "There's something else," he said. "We found a second projection." Keanu and Mariko both looked up. "It's a sequence," the diver explained. "It only activates when two bots are triggered at the same time, across the reef." Mariko stood. "A dual-key protocol?" "Exactly," the diver nodded. "Like she wanted both of you, together, to unlock it." They exchanged a look. Back in their wetsuits, they dove again. This time, they coordinated, Mariko on the eastern ridge, Keanu on the southern ledge. They found the twin bots, crusted with coral and glinting in the filtered light. With a nod through their masks, they each pressed their gloved hands onto the metal casings. A moment of silence passed. Then the reef lit up. From dozens of nodes, a radiant blue glow pulsed outward in synchronized waves. The coral responded, shifting subtly, like it was breathing in rhythm. From the center of the reef, a single projection appeared, larger than the others. A map, an evolving, three-dimensional map of global oceanic dead zones and reef fissile zones. At its center, Hana's algorithms, alive and self-adapting. Hana hadn't just made something beautiful, she had made something urgent, something scalable, something alive. When they returned to the surface, Mariko didn't bother hiding her awe. She didn't just want to fix one reef, she said, voice shaking. She left us the blueprint to heal the world. Keanu stared at the glowing waves below them. The horizon stretched wide and silent, as if waiting. "I guess we know our next step," he murmured. She nodded. "Yes. But this time, we don't go in as two broken people chasing memory." He looked at her. She smiled faintly. "This time," she said, "we go as her parents." The world took notice almost overnight. Within days of the Okinawan dive, Hana's reef had become a global headline. Drone footage of the glowing coral, pulsing with light and regenerating at a pace previously thought impossible, flooded every platform. Networks played the clip of the holographic Hana over and over again, looping her calm face, framed in the shimmer of ocean light. Her final message echoed across continents. "This reef is not mine. It belongs to the future." Hashtags trended, scientists scrambled. Celebrities posted emotional tributes. Environmentalists rejoiced. Skeptics demanded data. World leaders issued cautious statements, some supportive, others skeptical. But for once, the planet seemed to hold its breath, not in fear, but in a kind of collective wonder. The Reef Heart Foundation, once just a name on a few grant proposals and a line item in Keanu's personal budget, suddenly became a central player in the climate conversation. Keanu watched it unfold from a quiet room in the LA lab, the screens buzzing with alerts, mentions, news feeds. Every major outlet wanted an interview. They called it a miracle reef, eco-resurrection, the Keanu effect. But to Keanu, none of it felt like victory. It felt like noise. He scrolled through photos of Hana as a child, tucked in a private folder on his phone. Her smile, her sketches of fish, her 8th grade science fair project titled Artificial Coral and Bio-Memory Storage. She had been dreaming this long before anyone had believed it possible. And now, as the world clamored to praise it, to fund it, to critique it, Keanu only wished she could see it herself. Mariko entered, holding a stack of reports. Her energy was electric, fueled by momentum and growing global interest. She spoke quickly, excitedly, about scaling up deployments to the Maldives and the Great Barrier Reef. European nations were offering logistics support. A South American research vessel was en route, Even a private aerospace company had offered to launch a satellite to monitor coral health in real time. "This is working," she said breathlessly. "Keanu, Hana's work, it's working." He didn't look up from the phone. "They're already calling it mine." She stopped. Her expression softened. "They're calling it yours because they know your name, but this is hers. You know that. I know that. And soon, so will they." He nodded but said nothing. The attention was becoming overwhelming. Paparazzi staked out the lab. Activists sent bouquets of coral-colored roses. Environmental forums speculated whether Keanu was a genius in disguise or just a grieving man with a big wallet. A few politicians labeled the project a distraction. One called it vanity tech for the rich. The words stung. Mariko tried to shield him from it, but the weight pressed in from all sides. A single tabloid headline pushed him over the edge. "Movie star plays God with the ocean." He disappeared the next morning. No note, no goodbye. Mariko found herself alone at the podium 2 days later at the United Nations Oceanic Summit. The UN hall was packed with scientists, world leaders, youth delegates, and journalists. Cameras were rolling. Mariko stood before them, a lone figure behind a wide blue lectern bearing the crest of the summit. The crowd had expected Keanu Reeves. Instead, they got her. She looked out at the sea of expectant faces, her hands trembling slightly on the edge of the podium. Her heart pounded with the pressure, the anger, the loss. Not just of Hana, not just of Keanu walking away, but of the narrative being twisted, turned into spectacle. She took a breath. "I wasn't supposed to be the one speaking today," she began. "You were expecting someone famous, someone beautiful and quiet and cinematic. But he's not here, because this story was never supposed to be about him." The room hushed. The story began in silence, in a hospital room where a girl named Hana was told she had a year to live. She used that year not to retreat, but to build, to design something no one asked for, something the world didn't believe in. Not even her father, not even me. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. He called it Reef Heart, but I think of it now as her letter to the planet. Her way of saying, "I see you hurting, and I will try to heal you, even if I'm not here to watch." Images of Hana's reef flickered on the screens behind her. The crowd stared at the surreal blue and gold formations, alive with motion. Robots moving like schools of fish, coral blooming where death once lived. I have seen Hana's reef. I have touched her work. I watched a machine she built play her smile and light across the ocean floor. She is not gone. She is living in the reefs she made, in the data she left, and in the thousands of people now pledging to carry her mission forward. She leaned forward, voice tightening with emotion. "So if you came here for a celebrity story or for viral content, leave. If you came to dismiss this as a vanity project by a grieving actor, go ahead and tweet that. But if you are here because you believe our daughters deserve a future with oceans, with reefs, with life, then stay. Help us. Help her." Silence followed. A long, electric silence. Then applause erupted, thunderous and rising. Some delegates stood. Others wept. Mariko stepped away from the podium, her legs barely steady. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked at the seat in the front row, empty now, where Keanu was supposed to be. And in her heart, she hoped he was watching, wherever he was. Later that evening, Mariko sat alone in her hotel room, exhausted but resolute. A knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, Keanu stood there, silent, holding a single seashell in his palm. Wordlessly, he placed it in her hand. It was smooth, weathered, and unmistakably from Hana's reef. His eyes were red but clear. No speeches, no apologies. Just the shared weight of loss and the quiet beginning of understanding. Mariko closed her fingers around the shell and nodded. In that moment, they weren't scientist and actor or grieving parents. They were Hana's voice. And her mission had just begun. The Los Angeles sun spilled softly through the tall windows of Keanu's home. The once quiet hallway at the end of the east wing, rarely used and lined with dust, had become something else entirely. What was once a forgotten guest room had now been transformed, slowly, deliberately, into Hana's room, her sanctuary, their tribute. Mariko had been hesitant at first. The idea of turning grief into space, into design, seemed impossible. But it was Keanu who stood by the door one evening with a large storage bin filled with Hana's blueprints, origami dolphins, and journals. His voice barely above a whisper, he said, "We can't bring her back, but maybe we can live with her." So they started together. Patricia offered curtains in sea green silk, textured like ocean current. Ava brought in ocean stones she'd collected from a childhood trip with Keanu. They placed them along the windowsill. Each family member contributed something: a reef-matted quilt, a hand-carved frame. Hana's old watercolor paintings, rescued from storage in Kyoto, were hung with reverence. In the center of the room, they placed Hana's desk, the original one from her Tokyo dorm. Mariko had kept it in pristine condition. Its corners still bore the marks of ambition: ink stains, pressure lines from calculations, a tiny notch where Hana once carved a wave with a penknife during a long night of brainstorming. They didn't try to restore it. The imperfections were part of her legacy. A screen in the corner cycled through videos of Hana's reefs in real time, live-streamed from the 3 oceans now touched by the Reef Heart Protocol. Mariko coded the display herself, embedding it with soft ambient sounds of bubbling currents and gentle waves. It was as if Hana's heart was still beating, softly, globally, from ocean to ocean. They called it simply Hana's room. Every Sunday evening, without fail, the family gathered inside Hana's room. It began as something small, just Keanu, Mariko, and Patricia, but soon grew into a tradition. Ava joined first, eager to help update the reef reports. Then Keanu's nephews drifted in, drawn by curiosity at the glowing maps on the wall and the gentle light of the reef livestream. Before long, it became what Patricia lovingly called their Family Reef Council. The format was simple. Everyone had a turn. Mariko would start with data from the scientists, growth rates, salinity reports, updated algorithms. Keanu would sometimes add commentary about field expeditions, speaking in his quiet, measured way that made even the technical updates feel steady and grounded. Ava brought enthusiasm, often sharing sketches of new designs inspired by Hana's blueprints. And the children, wide-eyed and brimming with imagination, invented their own updates. One of the youngest nephews, barely 7, would raise his hand solemnly every week to declare that the dolphin said thank you. Another insisted he could talk to the bots in his dreams, relaying wild stories of underwater adventures. Instead of correcting them, Keanu and Mariko listened with soft smiles. It didn't matter whether the stories were real. What mattered was that the children felt Hana's presence too. It became the kind of tradition that stitched a family together in ways they hadn't realized they were missing. There was laughter now, in the room built out of grief. Patricia teased her son about his habit of staring too long at the data charts before speaking. Ava challenged Mariko to let the younger ones take turns presenting, complete with hand-drawn charts taped to the wall. The sanctuary grew warmer with each gathering, layered with voices, with love. Late one evening, after the children had gone home and Patricia had retired to her own room, Keanu lingered in Hana's sanctuary. Mariko sat cross-legged on the floor beside the desk, leafing through one of Hana's notebooks. The paper was worn, filled with equations on one page and doodles of sea turtles on the next. "She met your quietness," Mariko said softly. "She never rushed. Even her handwriting looked patient." Keanu sat across from her, his elbows resting on his knees. And she had your fire. The way she fought to make the impossible sound inevitable. Next. More licorice eagle eyes and several. They sat in silence for a long time, the Reef live stream casting a soft glow across the walls. The coral on screen pulsed with light, as though breathing. Finally, Mariko spoke again, her voice heavy but clear. Maybe grief is just love with nowhere to go. The words settled over them like the tide. Keanu looked up, his eyes tired but open. Then maybe this room gives it somewhere to go, he said. Mariko closed the notebook and pressed it to her chest. She didn't cry. She just breathed, and for the first time in years, the breath didn't catch. In the weeks that followed, Hana's room became more than a sanctuary. It became a compass. Decisions for the foundation were discussed there first. Difficult conversations found gentleness there. Even disagreements lost their sharp edges when handled beneath Hana's watchful presence. It was as if the room itself had become a mediator, reminding them that every word spoken inside should be measured against love, not pride. One evening, Ava brought a small record player and a stack of vinyls. She set the needle down and music filled the sanctuary. Not loud, not commanding, just soft jazz, the kind that made the air sway. The younger children danced clumsily, their small feet stumbling across the rug. Keanu watched, remembering Hana's note about dancing. Mariko noticed too. She leaned against the desk, arms folded, a faint smile curving her lips. Their eyes met, and neither looked away. The music swelled. Ava beckoned them with an exaggerated bow, teasing, "Come on, it's family tradition now." Keanu stood first. Mariko hesitated, then placed her hand in his. They moved awkwardly at first, not sure where to place their grief, their history, their unspoken fears. But then the rhythm caught them, and something shifted. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. But it was real. In that moment, Hana's room was filled not just with remembrance, but with renewal. Love, tentative but alive, began to find its way back into the spaces grief had once filled. And for the first time since Hana's letters arrived, Keanu and Mariko allowed themselves to imagine a future. Not just of work, not just of legacy, but of life. The calendar marked the day with a quiet cruelty. 30 years ago, Hana should have entered the world not as a secret, not as a whisper between two divided lives, but as a celebrated child, with both her parents by her side. Now, instead, Keanu and Mariko found themselves standing on the deck of a research vessel in Okinawa, surrounded by a team of scientists, divers, and family members, preparing for a different kind of celebration. The morning was hushed, the sky painted with muted grays and soft streaks of gold. The ocean rolled steadily, its rhythm carrying a solemn kind of music. Keanu leaned against the railing, eyes fixed on the horizon, his hands tightening around the edge as though holding on to something unseen. Mariko stood nearby, dressed in her wetsuit, her hair pulled back, her expression a mixture of calm focus and fragile resolve. She carried in her hands the plaque they had designed together. It was made of titanium, resistant to salt and time, etched with words that had taken weeks to settle on. Words that felt like both an ending and a beginning. Hana Reeves, daughter, dreamer, builder of oceans. Patricia was there too, seated on a bench beneath the deck canopy. She clutched a shawl against the sea breeze and watched her son with steady eyes. Her presence had become an anchor for all of them. Ava fussed nearby with equipment, while Keanu's nephews whispered excitedly about dolphins and mermaids, their innocence offering balance to the grief pressing on the adults. When the time came, Keanu and Mariko moved to the edge of the vessel with the divers. The plaque rested carefully inside a protective case. A small bouquet of white lilies, tied with blue ribbon, lay beside it. Keanu lowered his mask and turned to Mariko. "You ready?" he asked softly. Her answer was not in words, but in the way she met his eyes. They nodded together, then stepped into the water. The descent was slow, deliberate. The reef stretched before them, alive with Hana's designs. Coral formations glowing faintly, bots weaving silently through the structures, fish moving in vibrant clouds. Every inch of it carried her imprint, her mind encoded in living color. At the center of the reef, a clearing had been prepared, a space where stone met sand, waiting for its marker. Keanu knelt first, holding the plaque with both hands. Mariko hovered beside him, steadying the frame as he anchored it into the seabed. The titanium glinted in the filtered sunlight, a quiet beacon. Together they placed the lilies beside it, their petals floating briefly before drifting downward, settling like soft hands upon the ocean floor. Keanu pressed his hand against the plaque for a long moment. The weight of it, the finality of the gesture, broke something inside him. His mask filled with tears that mingled with the seawater. Mariko reached out, placing her hand over his, anchoring him not just to the plaque but to her, to their shared loss and their shared love. The reef shimmered around them, as if alive with acknowledgement. One of the bots drifted close, its lights pulsing faintly. Keanu could have sworn it lingered, watching, before slipping back into its silent work. When they finally surfaced, the world felt different. The grief was still there, heavy as the ocean itself, but so too was a strange, tentative peace. That night, the sea gave them its answer. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the water in molten shades of orange and violet. The deck of the research vessel glowed under lantern light. Family and crew gathered quietly, as if unwilling to disturb the sacredness of what they had done that day. Patricia held a cup of tea between her palms, her gaze fixed on the ocean. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "I never met her, yet I feel as though she's been with me all along, today more than ever." Her words carried into the silence, and Mariko reached for her hand. Ava unrolled a journal where she had written observations, both scientific and personal. She read aloud the reef report in a steady voice, detailing the coral growth, the success of the bots, the resilience of Hana's work. When she finished, she closed the notebook and whispered, "Happy birthday, Hana." The children lit small floating candles and released them into the water. Tiny flames drifted across the surface, bobbing with the waves, carrying wishes into the dark. Their reflections shimmered like stars scattered on the sea. Keanu stood apart, leaning against the railing. The sea air was cool against his face. He felt the weight of memory pressing in, yet also the quiet presence of something unseen, something eternal. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Happy birthday, sweetheart." And then, as if in response, the ocean moved. A sudden splash broke the stillness. 2 dolphins arced gracefully out of the water, breaching so close to the boat that the spray washed over the deck. Another followed, and another, until a whole pod surrounded them, leaping and diving, their sleek bodies silvered in the moonlight. The children squealed with delight, pointing, laughing, clapping. Patricia pressed her hands to her face, overcome. Mariko stood frozen, tears spilling freely, watching the shapes dance in the waves. Keanu barely breathed. He gripped the railing tighter, his eyes locked on the dolphins. And then he whispered, so quietly only Mariko beside him could hear, "That's her." She turned to him, stunned. He nodded once, his voice breaking. "That's Hana. She's here." The dolphins circled the vessel for nearly 10 minutes, their calls rising into the night air like a chorus. When they finally swam off into the open sea, the silence they left behind felt charged, filled with meaning. Mariko leaned against him, her forehead resting on his shoulder. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The sea had answered. On the deck of that boat, with candles flickering and dolphins disappearing into the horizon, grief transformed into something else. Promise. a promise that Hana's legacy would live, not only in reefs and bots, but in them, in love, in family, in the ocean itself. The last candle flickered out on the waves. Keanu whispered into the night, "We'll keep going, Hana." Mariko squeezed his hand. The ocean, vast and alive, whispered back. The house was quiet in the early hours of morning. Keanu had fallen asleep on the couch in Hana's room, his head tilted back, the glow of the Reef live stream still flickering against his face. Mariko sat at Hana's desk, unable to rest, her fingers moving through the files and drives their daughter had left behind. She had already read most of them, her research papers, her technical journals, her early notes on Reef Heart. But something still nagged at her, an intuition that Hana hadn't left everything out in the open. It was then, in a directory tucked deep inside Hana's encrypted folders, that Mariko saw it. The file was labeled simply Futureproof Project for sibling use. Her breath caught. The words looked almost playful, almost hopeful, but there was weight beneath them. She hesitated, staring at the title. Hana hadn't had a sibling. Unless she had always believed one day she might. She entered Hana's usual password, a complex string of numbers tied to dates only the two of them would know. The file resisted, encrypted beyond her expectations, until a second prompt appeared. It asked for two codes, one labeled Mom, one labeled Dad. Her hands shook. Mariko whispered into the room, "She wanted both of us." The sound stirred Keanu from his sleep. He blinked, saw her at the desk, and rose quietly. "What is it?" he asked, his voice husky. She turned the screen toward him. The file prompts glowed in the dim light, waiting, demanding both halves. For a moment they only stared. Then Keanu sat beside her, his hand brushing hers. Without a word, he typed a code he knew in his bones Hana had left for him. Something tied to a memory of oceans, perhaps, or a date only a father would understand. Mariko added hers. The file opened. A cascade of data unfolded across the screen. Blueprints, simulations, intricate models far more advanced than anything Hana had left in her Reef Heart plans. It was an entire framework for AI-powered oceanic climate balancers. Machines not just designed to rebuild reefs, but to stabilize temperatures, currents, and ecosystems on a global scale. Mariko covered her mouth with her hand. She was planning for decades ahead. She was building something bigger than even Reef Heart. Keanu leaned forward, scanning the documents, awe and grief tangling together in his chest. "She called it future-proof," he murmured, "for sibling use." He looked at Mariko then, his voice breaking. "She believed we'd try again." Before Mariko could answer, another notification appeared on the screen. A locked message, pulsing faintly. It read, "If Mom and Dad ever decide to try again, this is my wedding gift." The air left the room all at once. Mariko pressed her hand against the desk to steady herself, her eyes filling with tears. She even thought of this. Keanu reached forward, trembling, and clicked to open the message. Inside was not more text, not more data, but a digital envelope. When it unfurled, a map appeared on the screen. Coordinates highlighted an isolated reef in the South Pacific, far from tourist paths, far from civilization. Beneath the map, a short note in Hana's handwriting appeared on the display. "I prepared something for you both. Look carefully, you'll know when you find it." Alongside the map, a three-dimensional rendering rotated slowly. Two rings, delicate yet strong, made from coral silica fused with diamond-hard crystal harvested from the reefs she had nurtured. Their surfaces glimmered faintly, patterned with organic ridges like ocean waves. Keanu inhaled sharply. His hand hovered over the screen as if he could touch them. "She made us rings," Mariko whispered. "Not just rings, not just adornments. These were her blessing, her way of giving them the future they had once lost. Keanu and Mariko sat in stunned silence, the glow of Hana's message washing over them. The room felt charged, as though Hana herself were there, watching their reactions, waiting for them to understand. Mariko touched the screen gently, tracing the outline of the coral silica rings. "She must have been working on these in secret," she whispered. "Not just technology, not just science. This was personal. This was us." Keanu swallowed hard, his voice low. "She believed we'd find our way back, even when we didn't believe it ourselves." For a long moment, neither spoke. The live stream of the reefs hummed softly in the background. Schools of fish darting through corals her bots had restored. Outside, dawn was breaking, the light beginning to filter through Hana's room. Finally, Keanu leaned back, exhaling. "So she left us a choice. A map, a place, and these rings. A wedding gift. If we're willing to accept it." Mariko looked at him, her eyes searching, hesitant but alive with something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility. "Do you think we're ready for that kind of gift?" Keanu's hand found hers across the desk. "Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But Hana, she trusted us to be brave enough, to love enough." Tears welled in Mariko's eyes as she nodded. The weight of grief hadn't disappeared, but in its place something new was blooming. Not quite hope, not quite healing, but the beginning of both. The map remained glowing on the screen, the coordinates waiting, calling. It was Hana's final riddle, her last promise. Somewhere out there, beneath waves and sky, her gift waited. Not just for them, but for the family they might still become. Mariko leaned her head against Keanu's shoulder. "Then we'll find it. For her. For us." Keanu closed his eyes, his arms settling around her. The reef live stream pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and alive, carrying Hana's presence into the room. And in the silence that followed, it felt as though Hana herself had answered. Her wedding gift was not just rings, it was the courage to love again. Keanu kissed Mariko's forehead, whispering, "We'll follow her map." Mariko closed her eyes, holding his hand. The rings, glowing softly on the screen, felt less like loss and more like destiny. The night was quiet inside Hana's room. The soft glow of reef footage flickered across the walls, casting waves of blue and green that seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the sea. Mariko had lit 2 candles on the desk, their flames trembling against the glass of Hana's old aquarium, now filled with shells collected from her reefs. Keanu stood by the window, his silhouette framed against the city lights. For a long time, neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence itself was full of grief, of memory, of the years that had slipped between them and the daughter who had bridged that distance at last. Finally, Mariko crossed the room. She placed her hand on the music box carved with cherry blossoms, the one that had first brought them here, the one that had held Hana's letters. She turned the key, and soft, lilting notes filled the air. Keanu turned at the sound, his eyes drawn to her. She held his gaze, uncertain but steady. "We never had a first dance," she said, her voice low, almost a confession. "Not at a wedding, not at a celebration. We never gave ourselves that." Keanu stepped closer, his face etched with both sorrow and tenderness. "Maybe," he said slowly, "this can be the last one." He extended his hand, unsure if she would take it. For a moment, Mariko hesitated. Then she placed her palm against his, letting him draw her into the open space in the center of Hana's room. The music from the box played softly, imperfect in its old mechanics, but perfect in its meaning. They moved slowly, uncertainly, as if learning not only the steps of a dance but the fragile choreography of forgiveness. Keanu's hand rested lightly on her back, Mariko's on his shoulder. Their steps were clumsy at first, but gradually they found rhythm, found ease, found something that felt like what Hana had wanted all along. As they turned in the dim light, Keanu's voice broke the silence. I kept imagining what it would be like, seeing her grow, seeing her become who she was meant to be. I missed all of it. But tonight, dancing with you, I feel as though she's giving it back to us. One moment at a time. Mariko's eyes filled, tears catching the candlelight. She would have loved this, she whispered. She always wanted her parents to dance. She wrote about it in her diary. She dreamed of it. Keanu held her closer, his breath steady against her hair. Then let's give her the dance she wanted. Let's give her the legacy she asked for. The music wound down, the final notes lingering like an echo. They stood in stillness, their foreheads pressed together, as though waiting for Hana herself to close the space between them. It was then that Keanu reached for the small wooden box Hana had labeled in her files, the one they had never dared to open fully until now. He placed it gently on the desk, beside the flickering candles. "Shall we?" he asked. Mariko nodded, her hand trembling as they lifted the lid together. Inside, wrapped in blue silk, lay 2 rings, crafted from coral silica and reef crystal, just as Hana's files had shown. They shimmered with the faint glow of ocean light, delicate yet enduring. And beneath them, folded carefully, was a letter. Keanu picked it up, his fingers unsteady, and began to read aloud. "If you're seeing this," Hana's words began, "then you chose love. You chose each other. Let that be the legacy. Not just reef heart, not just science, but love itself. The kind that survives storms, distance, and time." Keanu's voice cracked. Mariko reached for the letter, finishing in a whisper. "If you wear these rings, do it knowing you are not just my parents. You are partners, builders, dreamers, together." The room was silent, save for the sound of 2 hearts remembering how to beat in unison. Keanu set the letter down with care, his hand trembling as though the paper itself carried the weight of Hana's presence. The coral silica rings glimmered faintly in the candlelight, the same blue tint that matched the ribbon Hana had once tied around her wooden box. Mariko stared at them, her chest tightening with a mixture of awe and grief. "She planned everything," she whispered. "Even this." Keanu turned toward her, his eyes heavy but resolute. "Mariko," he said softly, "I don't want to let more years pass in silence. I don't want to carry regret any longer. She gave us the map, back to each other." He sank to one knee, the old floor creaking beneath him. He didn't need a spotlight, or a crowd, or the grandeur of the world he often walked in. He only needed this moment, in Hana's sanctuary, with the woman he had lost and found again. Holding the glowing ring between his fingers, Keanu's voice shook with reverence. "You are the love I never forgot. You are Hana's mother, my partner, the person I've always been searching for. Will you marry me, Mariko?" Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, all she could do was stare at him, her vision blurred with tears. She reached out, touched his cheek with trembling fingers, and let the word fall. Free. Yes, it was quiet, but it was absolute. A vow spoken not only to him, but to Hana, to the ocean, to the years they had lost, and the years still to come. Keanu slid the coral silica ring onto her hand. She placed the twin ring on his. Together, their fingers intertwined, the shimmer of Hana's gift sealing what words could not. They remained standing in Hana's room, hands entwined, the rings glimmering like captured fragments of the sea. Patricia appeared in the doorway, her eyes moist, but she said nothing, only smiled. Ava peeked in behind her, wide-eyed, sensing the sacredness of the moment. Keanu drew Mariko close, pressing his forehead to hers. "Then let this be our first dance and our last promise," he whispered. They swayed gently, no music now but the steady rhythm of their hearts. For the first time in decades, the weight of loss loosened. Hana's legacy was love, and they had finally chosen it. Equals, equals, equals. Equals, 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 14. First thing equals 14. The reef stretched endlessly beneath the late afternoon sun, its colors shimmering like living stained glass beneath the tide. The beach was quiet, intimate, the waves rolling in soft rhythms against the sand. They had chosen this place carefully, not just any shore, but the very reef Hana's early biobots had first restored. It was as though the ocean itself had been waiting for this moment. Chairs were arranged in a simple semicircle, draped with white linen and decorated with small shells collected by Ava and Patricia. Only family had been invited, as Hana would have wanted. No flashing cameras, no media, no spectacle. Just the people who had carried the weight of her absence and the miracle of her legacy. At the center of the ceremony stood something unusual, something alive. Hana's final robot prototype, sleek and organic, designed to look almost like a living coral bloom, had been brought carefully from the lab. When sunlight touched its outer shell, it released a low, resonant hum, a sound both mechanical and strangely soothing, like the ocean singing through a voice Hana had engineered herself. Mariko stood at the water's edge in a simple gown of ivory linen, the fabric catching the sea breeze, her hair pinned loosely with a blue ribbon, the same shade that had bound Hana's letters. Her bare feet sank into the warm sand. The ocean air kissed her skin, carrying with it the smell of salt and memory. Keanu waited a few steps away, dressed in a dark suit but barefoot as well, grounding himself in the earth and the water as though to stand closer to his daughter's spirit. He held Hana's coral silicica ring between his fingers, the same one he had slipped onto Mariko's hand in Hana's room. Today, before the ocean, he would make that promise again. As the ceremony began, Patricia rose from her seat and spoke softly, her voice shaking but strong. "We are gathered here not only to witness a marriage, but to honor a daughter whose love has guided us to this day. Hana saved the ocean, and in doing so, she saved us." She looked at Mariko, then Keanu. "And today, she gives her parents the gift she always dreamed of, a chance to walk together." The words carried through the breeze, simple and true. When it was time for vows, Keanu stepped forward. His voice trembled, but his eyes never left Mariko's. He took her hands, roughened from years of work, yet soft in his grasp. "Your daughter saved the world," he said, each word deliberate, steady. "And she saved me. She reminded me of who I was when I thought I had lost everything. Through her, I found my way back to you. Mariko, I vow to carry her dream with you, to honor her by loving you fiercely, patiently and endlessly. You are my partner, my compass, my family. Today, I promise not just to love you, but to live the life Hana wanted us to share." Mariko's tears fell freely, glistening in the glow of sunset. She breathed deeply, then lifted her chin. Her voice came soft but unwavering. "Our love built a legacy," she said, her accent wrapping around each word like music. "It was imperfect, it was broken, and yet Hana turned it into something eternal. She taught me that what we built together was never wasted. It became the foundation for her work, her dreams, her oceans. And it began with her, with our daughter. Keanu, I vow to walk beside you as we finish what she started, not as two people carrying grief, but as two who have chosen love again." The hum of Hana's robot grew louder at that moment, resonant and steady, as if blessing their vows. The sound mingled with the waves, with the silence of the family watching. with the very breath of the ocean itself. Keanu and Mariko held each other's gaze as the final light of day broke across the horizon. The sun, heavy and golden, slipped lower, painting the reef in shades of crimson and violet. Around them, the tide whispered against the sand, like a gentle applause. Hana stepped forward with the rings, carrying them in a small shell polished smooth by the sea. Her hands shook as she offered them, but her smile was steady. "From Hana," she whispered, her voice trembling. Keanu took the smaller ring and slid it onto Mariko's hand. The coral silica shimmered with a glow that seemed to pulse with life, catching the fading sun. Mariko, in turn, placed the larger ring on Keanu's finger, her thumb brushing against his skin, as though sealing the promise. Patricia wiped at her eyes, her expression a mixture of pride and grief. Even the youngest nephews fell quiet, sensing the sacredness of the moment. The officiant, a close friend from Hana's foundation, lifted her hands. "With the ocean as witness, with Hana's legacy as bond, and with love as the eternal vow, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The hum of Hana's robot deepened, vibrating through the sand and echoing into the waves. And then, as if on cue, dolphins breached just offshore, leaping through the rose-colored surf. The family gasped, laughter and tears mingling. Keanu pulled Mariko close, pressing his forehead against hers, before kissing her with the quiet reverence of a man who had waited decades for this second chance. The sun dipped fully beneath the horizon, leaving behind a sky streaked with stars. Their vows, sealed in sand and sea, belonged not just to them, but to Hana, to the ocean, and to the generations who would inherit the waters her dream had saved. As twilight deepened, the family gathered closer, circling Keanu and Mariko as though to anchor the moment in memory. The robot pulsed one last luminous hum, then settled into silence, like Hana's voice resting in peace. Keanu wrapped an arm around Mariko, whispering, "She's here. She always will be." Mariko nodded, tears shining. Together they turned toward the sea, rings gleaming under the first stars. The dolphins swam parallel to the shore, their sleek bodies carving arcs of silver light. For the first time in years, the night felt whole. Grief transformed, love renewed, and Hana's dream alive forever. The ocean breeze swept through the open windows of their coastal home, carrying with it the scent of salt and the low roar of waves meeting the shore. It was a year after their wedding by the reef, and the sound of a newborn's cry now filled the air. Mariko lay in the hospital bed, exhausted yet radiant, her arms cradling the small bundle against her chest. Keanu sat beside her, unable to take his eyes off the miracle they had been given. The child's dark hair clung in wisps to her delicate head, her tiny fists clenching and unclenching as though already reaching for something unseen. When her eyes fluttered open, they were deep and searching, the kind of gaze that seemed too wise for a newborn. Mariko whispered the name softly, almost reverently. "Aiko Hana Reeves." Keanu repeated it, his voice thick with emotion. "Aiko, our gift, our hope." His hand brushed the baby's cheek, and she responded with a soft coo, as if she recognized his touch. Patricia, standing nearby with tears streaming down her face, placed her hand gently over the baby's blanket. "She carries her sister with her," she said, "not just in her name, but in the light of her presence." The first weeks of Aiko's life were a blur of sleepless nights, quiet feedings, and hushed conversations spoken with reverence. Every moment was layered with the awareness of Hana's absence, and yet, in Aiko, there was also Hana's presence. It was as though the child was born already carrying the memory of the sister she would never meet, but whose legacy she would grow up inside of. It didn't take long for Keanu and Mariko to realize that Hana's vision had not ended with Reef Heart. Together with their foundation team, they began developing the Aiko Protocol, an evolution of Hana's work designed not just to restore reefs, but to educate. These new reef heart bots were programmed with advanced AI that allowed them to interact with communities, schools, and even children. They could project holograms of coral reefs, explain ocean ecosystems, and invite people to plant seeds of restoration themselves. The first time the bots were tested in a classroom in Okinawa, children gasped as holographic dolphins swam above their desks, weaving in and out of projected coral gardens. One little girl reached out, and the AI responded by guiding her through the placement of a digital coral seed. The lesson ended with the words, "The ocean belongs to all of us. Will you help protect it?" News spread quickly, and the Aiko protocol became a global sensation. Schools across the world clamored to host the educational bots, and scientists praised the fusion of ecological repair with ecological education. Hana's reef heart dream had healed oceans. Aiko's protocol would ensure that future generations learned to keep them alive. At home, Aiko grew alongside the dream that bore her name. By the time she was old enough to crawl, Keanu had already introduced her to the sound of waves and the cool touch of seawater at the edge of the reef. Mariko would hold her in the shallows, and Aiko would splash her hands against the surface, laughing at the droplets. It was as though the ocean itself delighted in her presence. On her first birthday, the family gathered once again at Hana's reef. The sun set slowly over the horizon as Keanu and Mariko waded into the water with Aiko in their arms. Patricia held a basket of seashells collected by Ava and the nephews, while the others carried drawings, small origami fish, and handwritten notes. They placed each offering carefully in a coral alcove near the plaque that bore Hana's name. "For your sister," Keanu whispered, guiding Aiko's small hand to place a seashell among the rest. The ocean lapped gently at their feet, as if acknowledging the gift. Above them, dolphins arced through the water, and the hum of Hana's final robot still resonated softly beneath the waves, standing watch over both daughters' legacies. As the years unfolded, Aiko grew quickly, her world shaped not by television or toys, but by tide pools, reef songs, and the quiet voices of family telling her stories of her sister. At age 3, she was already learning to swim, her small arms cutting through the shallow water while Keanu guided her gently. Mariko would laugh, her heart aching with joy, as Aiko surfaced with a triumphant splash and declared, "The ocean is my playground." Echo said the words to Keanu in her mind alone, as Aiko surfaced with a triumphant splash and declared, "The ocean is my playground." By her 5th birthday, the annual visits to Hana's reef had become sacred tradition. Each year, Aiko brought her own offering, a crayon drawing of fish, a necklace made of shells, or a story she had dictated to her parents about Hana teaching her how to swim in dreams. Patricia would kneel beside her, whispering prayers of thanks for the miracle that bound their generations together. At school, Aiko proudly told classmates about "my sister Hana, who cleans the ocean with robots," her words lighting up imaginations everywhere. Teachers invited Keanu and Mariko to speak, and soon children across classrooms were pledging to protect their beaches and seas. Hana's voice had not faded. Through the Aiko protocol, it had only grown louder. On Aiko's 6th birthday, the family returned once more to the reef at dusk. The water shimmered with living color, coral stretching wider than it had in decades. Keanu carried Aiko on his shoulders as she clutched a small origami crane. "For Hana," she said, releasing it into the tide. The paper bird floated, caught briefly in the surf, then sank gently among the coral Hana's bots had built. Mariko slipped her hand into Keanu's, whispering, "Her legacy is safe now. Aiko carries it without even knowing the weight." Keanu nodded, his eyes glistening. "Hope beneath the waves. That's what Hana gave us. And now, Aiko will grow up inside it." The dolphins appeared again that evening, leaping as if in celebration. The family watched in silence, hearts full, knowing that the ocean had claimed both daughters, and returned them as gifts for generations to come. Aiko sat cross-legged in the middle of Hana's room, tracing the glowing lines of a reef schematic her sister had once drawn by hand. The morning sun filtered in through the open windows, casting light across the ocean-spurred walls. Coral pink, seafoam green, and deep blue mingled in a mural that Hana had designed but never seen completed. Mariko had finished painting it herself the night before Aiko was born. At just 6 years old, Aiko moved with an effortless grace, as if the sea whispered through her tiny limbs. She didn't just look like Hana. She had her same thoughtful eyes, her quiet strength. And that morning, as Keanu passed by the room holding a steaming mug of tea, Aiko looked up and said something that stopped him cold. "I saw her in my dream," Aiko whispered. "She said she's proud of you." Keanu didn't say anything at first. He set down the mug carefully, then knelt in front of her, steadying himself with one hand on the floor. "What did she look like?" he asked softly. Aiko smiled. She had a dress that shimmered like the reef, and her hair floated like jellyfish threads. She touched my cheek and said, "Tell them I see everything, and I'm proud." Then she laughed and swam away. The words hit Keanu like a wave that carried no pain, only peace. There were no questions, no need to probe for truth. He believed her completely. That afternoon, the three of them, Keanu, Mariko, and Aiko, boarded the small solar boat that Hana had once designed herself. The reef's coordinates were already programmed. Mariko had packed a basket with fruit, seaweed crackers, and a little journal where Aiko had drawn stick-figure sea creatures and titled the page, "For Big Sister." They reached the reef just before sunset. The waters sparkled beneath the golden sky, alive with motion. Reef heart bots glided below like curious manta rays, their soft lights illuminating paths across the seabed. Coral towers pulsed with new life, restored by Hana's blueprints and Aiko's future. Keanu dropped anchor quietly and helped Aiko into her tiny life vest. She pressed her face to the glass floor of the boat and gasped. "There's more colors than last year," she whispered. Mariko smiled. "The reef's still healing. It's growing because someone loved it enough to protect it." Akito tilted her head. "Like Hana?" Keanu nodded, exactly like Hana. As the boat gently rocked over the reef, Aiko pulled out her drawings. There were 6 sheets of recycled paper, each one decorated with crayon-colored sea turtles, rainbow fish, and one picture of a girl with stars in her hair standing in the waves. She held it up proudly. "This one's her. I call it Big Sister of the Ocean." Keanu took the drawing with reverence, brushing his thumb across the figure. Mariko leaned against his shoulder and smiled. "She would have loved this, Aiko. She loved to draw, just like you." Aiko beamed and then pointed at one of the reef heart bots gliding beneath the surface. "Is that one Manta 7? Mariko leaned over the railing. "Close. That's Manta 6. Manta 7 must be further out. But guess what? They all carry your sister's programming. She gave them their purpose." Aiko watched, wide-eyed, as a school of fish swirled around one of the bots. The glowing device gently redirected its path to avoid disturbing them, moving like a silent guardian. It was peaceful, beautiful, like a living memory in motion. "I want to be a helper like that," Aiko said softly. "Can I?" Keanu's voice broke slightly as he answered. "You already are, Aiko. You bring life with your heart, just like she did." The family sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that says everything. The sun dipped lower, setting the waves ablaze in amber and fire. The reef lit up like a city waking at twilight, and the reef heart bots responded to the light, humming softly through the water. Their sensors detected the change in the atmosphere, adapting their patterns to maintain balance, just as Hana had designed. Then, just as the last light met the edge of the horizon, 3 dolphins breached near the boat. Not far away, another jumped, then 2 more. Aiko gasped. "They're playing!" Keanu's hand found Mariko's. "They did this last year, too, right after we placed the plaque." "Do you think it's her?" Mariko asked gently. Keanu didn't answer with words. He just looked out across the sea, eyes misted, and nodded once. Aiko stood up and waved both arms high in the air. "Hi, big sister," she called. "We love you. Thank you for the reef." One of the dolphins turned mid-air, twisting in a spiral before splashing down, as if answering back. Keanu reached into the bench compartment and pulled out the coral silica box. Inside were the rings Hana had left behind, now modified into pendants, one for each of them. Aiko's was the smallest, engraved with the phrase, "Grow gently, shine bright." They each put theirs on without ceremony. No speeches, no big declarations, just the quiet understanding that love endures in the things we build, the people we raise, and the dreams we protect. The sun disappeared, the reef glowed stronger in the dark, a living monument. Keanu flipped a switch, and the boat's soft underwater lights activated, casting a gentle spotlight on the reef heart hub just beneath them. It pulsed with steady light, surrounded by sea creatures, robotic tendrils, and coral polyps clinging to artificial limbs like vines to a fence. "That's the heart of it," Mariko whispered. "That's where it all began." Keanu wrapped his arm around her. "No. It began in a hospital nursery with a little girl too curious to sleep, already watching the world like it was asking to be fixed." Ayo didn't understand every word, but she felt it, the weight of legacy and the warmth of love. Aiko nestled between them, her pendant glowing faintly in the dusk. She whispered, "I saw her again. In my dream. She said she's proud of you." Keanu closed his eyes. Mariko kissed Aiko's head. The reef pulsed below, and somewhere beyond the waves, the legacy of love kept shimmering.